To lead like a woman is not merely to imitate strength, but to embody it in its most instinctive, intuitive, and transformative form. The world often measures leadership in external power, domination, and force, but there is another kind of power, silent, circular, and rooted in the soul. A woman leads from the depths, from that mysterious center where the personal becomes the universal, and the heart becomes a compass. She leads from a place untouched by applause or criticism. The voice that guides her is not the voice of the crowd, but the voice that echoes in silence, the one that rises from solitude, self-reflection, and raw honesty. Her authority is not borrowed from titles, institutions, or traditions. It is born from the long journey inward, where she has faced her fears, questioned her worth, and reclaimed her essence. She no longer bends herself to fit into molds designed by others, nor does she dilute her truth to avoid discomfort. She has learned that chasing approval is a hunger that never ends, a mirage that keeps moving farther the closer you get. And so she walks a different path, a path lit by her own knowing. There may be times when the world misunderstands her, when her choices seem too bold, too quiet, too unconventional, but she no longer lives for explanation. She lives for alignment. Her compass is not popularity, it is integrity. She does not perform, she expresses. She does not follow trends, she follows the thread of what feels deeply right, even when no one else sees it yet. Because she knows that the cost of betraying herself is far greater than the cost of disappointing others. She has discovered the sacredness of standing alone, not in isolation, but in self-possession. Her worth is not negotiated, it is felt. It pulses in her bones like an ancient rhythm that says, I am enough as I am here to live, not to please, I am here to lead, not to impress. And from this place of rootedness, her leadership becomes a beacon, not a mirror for approval, but a flame for awakening. She listens to what cannot be measured, to the felt sense before the fact, to the quiet pull that says, this way. In a world that often worships logic and dismisses feeling, she has reclaimed her intuition as a sacred compass, not as a fallback or guess, but as a form of knowing that arises from the depth, solder than language, more ancient than reason. Her intuition is not vague emotion, it is refined perception, sharpened by her presence, her attention, and her inner attunement. She doesn't demand evidence before trusting her instincts. She understands that not all wisdom arrives with proof. Some wisdom arrives with a whisper, a sensation, a dream, or an unease that cannot be ignored. She has learned to trust the goosebumps, the tightness in the chest, the sudden clarity that strikes without warning. She knows that the unconscious speaks in symbols, in patterns, in energy, and she listens, not just with her ears but with her whole being. Where others second, guess, she senses. Where others stall in overthinking, she moves from alignment. Intuition doesn't rush her, it grounds her. It's not erratic or reckless, it's the quiet current underneath the noise. And while others might call it irrational, she knows it's simply deeper than reason can reach. When she walks into a room, she feels the unspoken dynamics. When she makes a decision, she includes the invisible variables. Her insight doesn't need to shout, it reveals. This way of knowing is not soft or passive. It is fierce, precise, and attuned to what others miss. And because she trusts herself, others begin to trust her too. Not because she has all the answers, but because she is in touch with something real, something that doesn't waver with trends or tremble under pressure. To lead from intuition is to return to the body, the gut, the soul. It is to follow the thread of truth, even when the path is unclear. It is to know that the most powerful choices are not always the loudest. They are often the ones that arise in stillness and come alive in motion. She doesn't wait to be certain, she waits to be aligned, and in doing so, she leads from a wisdom that is rooted not in fear, but in presence. She honors her intuition as wisdom, not weakness. In a world that has long equated certainty with facts and authority with logic, she dares to trust something older, something deeper. Her intuition is not a vague feeling or a sentimental impulse. It is an ancient knowing that rises from the wellspring of her being. It does not shout, it whispers. It arrives not with explanation but with resonance, and she has learned, often through trial and error, that those subtle whispers are not to be ignored. She remembers the times she silenced that voice, the way things unraveled when she did. She remembers the unease she tried to rationalize away, the red flags she painted green, the dreams she dismissed as silly, and she remembers the consequences of betraying herself in those moments. So now, she listens. Carefully, with reverence, because intuition has become her compass in a world filled with noise, contradiction, and manipulation. She knows that intuition is not irrational, it is trans-rational. It does not operate on the surface of things but from the depths, where connections are made not linearly but symbolically, emotionally, energetically. It gathers information beneath awareness, through body, memory, instinct, and spirit. It bypasses the masks and the words and sees into the heart of the matter. While logic dissects, intuition synthesizes. Where reason hesitates, intuition acts, not recklessly, but with rooted confidence. And because she honors this wisdom, her decisions carry a quiet power. She doesn't need to justify them to anyone who doesn't understand. She has nothing to prove. She doesn't need a spreadsheet to know when something is off, nor does she need consensus to follow what feels right. She knows when to say yes even if it's scary. She knows when to say no even if it's unpopular. And she knows when to wait, to breathe, to feel her way forward rather than force a result. There is strength in this kind of listening. It requires courage to trust the unseen, to follow the inner signal when the outer world offers every reason to turn away. But she has discovered that her greatest clarity comes not from overthinking, but from being deeply present. Present to her body, to her dreams, to her emotions, to her quiet. She no longer lets the intellect sit on a throne alone. She has made a seat for intuition at the table, and in doing so, has restored a lost part of herself. So when she leads from this wholeness, from this integration. Her leadership is not cold calculation. It is soulful discernment. It is informed not just by what the world shows her, but by what her inner world reveals. And that makes her presence magnetic, her decisions wise, her leadership timeless, because she knows that the deepest truths are not always spoken, but they are always felt. She does not fear her darkness, she befriends it. Where others turn away from discomfort, from shame, from anger, from grief, she turns toward it with open eyes and an open heart. She understands that leadership is not about projecting perfection, but about embodying wholeness. And wholeness includes the shadow, that part of her which was once judged, hidden, rejected, or misunderstood. She does not cast it out. She welcomes it back, because she knows that what she denies gains power over her in silence, but what she embraces becomes transformed. She has walked through the inner underworld, the territory where wounds become patterns, where survival mechanisms masquerade as personality, where the old stories play on loop. And instead of denying what she found there, she sat with it. She let herself feel the ache, the anger, the jealousy, the fear, not to drown in it, but to understand it, because behind every shadow is a message, a need that was unmet, a truth that was silenced, a strength that was buried beneath shame. And she, with fierce compassion, chose to reclaim it all. She has realized that her shadow is not her enemy, it is her mirror. It shows her the parts of herself that long to be integrated, not fixed, not punished. But held, when she faced her rage, she found her boundaries. When she touched her grief, she unearthed her love. When she owned her envy, she discovered her desire. The very emotion she was taught to hide became the map back to her soul. And this journey inward, this fearless descent, is what makes her leadership so rare, so raw, so real. She does not lead from a mask. She does not pretend to be invulnerable. She knows that the strongest person in the room is the one who has met their own weakness. She doesn't weaponize her power, she humanizes it. And in doing so, she creates safety, not just for others, but for herself. People are drawn to her not because she's flawless, but because she's honest. Because she has turned her wounds into wisdom, her scars into sovereignty, her presence gives others permission to be whole, not just polished. She no longer fears being too much or not enough. She has stood in the full spectrum of her being and found it sacred. Her light does not exist without her shadow, and her shadow is not a flaw. It is a teacher. She has learned that integrating the shadow is not about being soft or indulgent. It is about being courageous enough to hold paradox, to carry depth, to live with integrity. So when she walks into a room, she does not need to dominate. Her power is quiet but undeniable. It radiates from within, because she leads not from the image of who she thinks she should be, but from the truth of who she is, messy, magnificent, multifaceted. And that, more than any strategy or structure, is what makes her unforgettable. She leads in circles, not hierarchies. Her leadership is not built upon control, command, or dominance. It flows from connection, collaboration, and shared presence. She does not need to be above others to feel powerful. Her power is not comparative. It is rooted. And because she does not fear being one among many, she is free to lead without superiority. She recognizes that true leadership is not about being at the top, but about creating spaces where everyone can rise. In her presence, no one is beneath her, and no one is forgotten. She listens not to respond, but to understand. She does not dictate from a pedestal. She gathers voices, draws out the unseen, and gives space for every perspective to breathe. She trusts the wisdom of the collective, the richness that emerges when differences are not silenced, but welcomed. She does not hoard authority. She shares it, distributes it, and multiplies it through others. And in doing so, she creates a ripple of empowerment far beyond her immediate reach. A circle is not linear. It is not a chain of command. It is a sacred geometry that invites presence, equality, and coherence. She knows this shape instinctively. It lives in her bones. It is the shape of community, of ritual, of gathering around fire and story and purpose. It is the shape of ancient councils, of maternal instinct, of collective healing. In a circle, every voice matters. Every role is essential. There is no less than or greater than. There is balance, flow, and reciprocity. She knows that leading in this way requires vulnerability, trust, and patience. It means giving up control for the sake of deeper coherence. It means stepping back so others can step forward. It means resisting the urge to dominate and choosing instead to guide through presence, modeling, and quiet clarity. It is not always easy. The ego often prefers to sit at the head of the table, but she has dissolved that illusion. She leads not to be seen but to see, not to impress but to inspire, not to be followed but to awaken leadership in others. And when challenges arise, she does not fracture the circle. She strengthens it. She brings conflict into the open, holds the tension, and seeks truth rather than control, because she believes in restoration, not punishment, dialogue, not decree. Her leadership doesn't suppress, it reveals. It doesn't isolate, it integrates, and this way of leading, soft, spacious, yet fierce, is deeply transformative. Those who gather around her do not feel small, they feel seen. They feel safe to speak, to feel, to contribute. In her circle, others remember their own wisdom. They remember that leadership is not a title, but a frequency, one that anyone can embody, and this is her secret power. She doesn't lead by being the loudest or the most dominant. She leads by creating a space where the soul of the group can emerge. She leads like the moon governs the tides, gently, rhythmically, magnetically, from the center, not the top, in circles, not hierarchies. Because she knows, when the circle is whole, everyone becomes a leader. She births change, not just commands it. She understands that real transformation is not manufactured through force or instant decree. It is nurtured, carried, and brought into the world through labor of the soul. Change for her is not a strategy or slogan. It is a process as sacred and organic as giving birth. It takes time, patience, and presence. She does not rush it. She does not impose it. She holds space for it to emerge from within. Where others try to control outcomes, she becomes a vessel for emergence. She listens for what is ready to be born rather than pushing what is not yet ripe. Her power lies not in manipulating the future, but in attuning to its unfolding. She knows that the greatest shifts often begin in silence, in the hidden places, in the deep, in the dark. Just as life begins in the womb, change begins in the unseen realms, in intuition, in vision, in intention, in deep inner knowing. She understands the cycles. She knows there is a season for everything, a time to conceive, a time to grow, a time to let go, a time to deliver. She does not panic in the waiting. She trusts the process, even when it is painful, even when it is unclear. Like a midwife of possibility, she remains steady amid the contractions of transformation. She breathes through resistance. She surrenders to the unknown, and she does not flinch when things fall apart, because she knows that the breakdown is often the beginning of something greater. She brings change that is alive, not sterile, not mechanical. The change she births has breath, body, and spirit. It touches the roots. It alters the energy in a room. It shifts the story, not just the surface. And she knows that such change requires presence, not pressure. It cannot be rushed by ego or checklist. It must be called forth with care and devotion. She does not just implement plans. She initiates awakenings. She waters the soil of the human heart so something new can take root. Her leadership is creative, not reactive. She doesn't repeat what has been done. She dares to imagine what has never been. And when she sees the potential for change, she doesn't seize it with force. She leans in, she listens, she aligns herself with it. She becomes its guardian, its messenger, its protector. She stands at the threshold between the old and the new and offers herself as the bridge. And because she knows what it is to carry change within her, she does not fear the discomfort it brings. She knows that every act of creation also involves destruction. Every emergence requires the death of something familiar. And she faces this with grace. She holds the paradox with open arms, that change is both beautiful and brutal, that it stretches us and frees us, that it is not clean, but it is sacred. She leads as the earth leads, through cycles, through rhythm, through regeneration. She knows that to bring something meaningful into the world, one must be willing to feel deeply, to stay present, and to trust the slow miracle of becoming. So she leads not with commands, but with consciousness. Not with control, but with creation. And in doing so, she doesn't just change what is around her. She changes what is within us.